Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Thursday afternoon, and I think it's okay to play around with this kind of conversation. Can Florida State be a team that makes the college football playoffs in 2025? Now, I think there are a lot of Florida State fans that probably see it the way I do, and that is, hey, I want to see a little bit more from this team before I'm going to jump fully on this train. We can start having this conversation because the more and more I've went back and watched this football game against Alabama, and I've watched this game in more times than I would like to admit on air here, that was no fluke. Florida State was clearly the better football team in almost every single area on Saturday afternoon against an Alabama team that there are a lot of people that picked Alabama to win a national championship in 2025. What needs to happen if Florida State does become a college football playoff caliber team in 2025? That's the conversation I want to get into. As good as it was for Florida State, I think there's another step that this football team can take. Now, before we get into some of those storylines, I do want to do this. Some more general observations from this football game. It was one of the more complete performances that I saw all weekend. And what I mean by that is, look, I'm looking at Florida State and say, I don't know if there's a top 10 NFL draft pick on this roster, but you talk about every single player on that field doing their job and doing it at a high level. That's what you saw. And then you combine it with the coaching staff. I'll continue to bang, bang, bang this drum. The real difference I see is number one, that this team's better. You know, the guys that you brought into this program through the portal, some of the true freshmen, it's a better football team than what we saw in 2024. Ain't no question about that. This coaching staff is astronomically better than what you had in 2024. I don't know if there was a better coordinator duo performance than what we saw from Tony White and Gus Malzahn. Florida State went from having one of the worst coaching staffs in the country in 2024, just a miserable coaching staff when it came to getting players ready, when it came to in-game adjustments. They've gone from that to what I saw on Saturday in terms of the game scripting, in terms of the in-game adjustments that Tony White made on defense, and say it's night and day different. So I think your personnel is better, and we're going to talk about that personnel. I think this coaching staff was elite on Saturday afternoon as well. Want to get into some things that I think can elevate this football team, give some more flowers out to some players that I thought really popped Saturday afternoon against Alabama. Before we get into it, as always, the Florida State fans, number one, appreciate you guys. It been a really fun talking this program, especially in the offseason with how much change this program went through. Many of the Florida State fans been rocking with the boys for a very long time, through the highs, through the lows. Appreciate you guys. Second thing I'll say, buckle up. It's going to be a really fun 2025 college football season. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it now. Want to start with some things that, in my opinion, can take this Florida State team up a notch, and that is Usman Chroma has the ability to really unlock this offense. So if there is one thing I take away from what we saw from the running backs, this kid is comfortably the most talented runner of the football. And I don't necessarily know if Florida State wanted to give him 20 carries in his first career college football game. I'm going into the next 2 weeks against teams that you should absolutely roll and say the whole goal for the next 14 days is get this kid rolling. And, you know, we know Gus Malzahn wants to find that bell cow. And I look at Usman Chroma and say, I think he's got the opportunity to be one of the best running backs that you see in this conference immediately as a freshman. I know that's a lot of hype for a kid that's played one career college football game. Number one, the physicality is incredible with this kid. I mean, he is all of 220 pounds, and he runs like a 220-pound running back. The short area quicks, the change of direction, the explosiveness, it's all there. I mean, you go down a checklist of qualities you want in a true, complete bell cow back. He leaves no box unchecked, and that ain't a shot at Gavin Sawchuk. That ain't a shot at Roydell Williams. I expect to see a lot of Jalen Lucas in the 2025 year, and I think Gus Malzahn has such a clear plan how to use Jalen Lucas. But you talk about a running back that has the opportunity to get 20-plus carries a game, be that featured back in this offense. I thought it was very clear. If we can get Usman Kroma to that point in 2025, it has the ability to take this offense up another level. That's number one. I would expand that conversation to a couple other freshmen on this team. How much better do some of these freshmen get? Javon Boggs, a quiet Saturday afternoon. We all know what we heard in fall camp, and we all saw how much he played on Saturday. How about the Desir brothers on the defensive line, specifically Mandrell? How much better can he get as a freshman? Now, keep in mind, when you're talking about freshmen, you expect improvement as the year goes on, as they get their feet wet more at the college football landscape. They're going to get better quicker than a fifth-year senior that's been around the sport for the last 5 years. How much better do these freshmen get, specifically a guy like Usman Kroma? Can he become that featured back in this offense? You talk about this football team taking another step. Usman Kroma, I think, has a large part to do with that. Number two, finding the vertical passing attack. It's going to be there. Look, Florida State is going to be able to run the football very, very well in 2025. There's one thing we learned. That's an offensive line that can move some bodies off the line of scrimmage. And we got an offensive coordinator that can scheme up a run game better than anybody else. And he's got the pieces too. Talk about Mekhi Danzy, you talk about Tommy Castellanos, talk about Jalen Lucas, you talk about Usman Kroma. We have the ability to run the football in so many different ways. You got an offensive coordinator who can maximize the personnel. This team will run the football well. Here's why that vertical passing attack is so important. There are going to be teams that are forced to drop their safeties in the box and say, hey, Florida State's really good at running the football. We ain't going to let them run the football all game long. We're going to start walking our safety in. If you have the ability to make teams pay vertically down the field, similar to how Tommy Castellanos did with Squirrel White on that first drive, going to be big. I mean, Alabama's like, hey, we ain't going to let them run the football. They played, I believe that was man covered with a single high safety and said, hey, Squirrel White working on a true freshman who was a 5-star, really good football player, go in vertically. Squirrel White creates separation. Tommy Castellanos throws a beautiful ball. That was the only throw on, according to PFF, that traveled 20-plus yards in the air, and it was a game-changing play. Can you find more of that as the season goes on? Because you best believe, teams will try to take away this rushing attack, and the only way to do it, if Florida State continues to run the ball how well they did, is put bodies in the box. When teams put bodies in the box, when they want to leave only one safety high, Deuce Robinson, Squirrel White, maybe Mekhi Danzy with his vertical speed, maybe Elijah Moore at some point. Do we have the ability to make teams pay for loading the box with an explosive vertical passing attack? Again, that doesn't mean that Florida State starts throwing the football around the yard, because their bread and butter is going to be the run. But when you have the ability to make teams pay, that's how you take this thing up another level. I want to flip over. The last thing I want to say, that this offensive line, when it was time to kind of show who you were up front, and I'm talking about the fourth quarter. I'm talking about when Mike Norvell is 4th and 1, Florida State side of the field, fourth quarter football game. Mike Norvell decides to go for it, get behind the right side of that offensive line, get behind Micah Pettis and Richie Len and say, hey, we going to run the football. The ability to move bodies off the line of scrimmage and go move the chains there, you can't teach that, man. That's what you saw from Florida State. You weren't getting anything close from that 2024. So monster shout out to the offensive line. But I do want to spend some more time talking about the defense, because the more you watch this game, the more takeaways you have. My biggest takeaway is, one, shout out some of the development that we've seen on the defensive line, most notably Daniel Lyons. Daniel Lyons went from a guy that we've seen the flashes, but we've never seen it consistently. He played almost 50 snaps in that football game. His impact, he had 5 quarterback hurries, couple of run stops. He was all over the place, and they moved him all around the defensive line. They played him as a 3-tech. I believe they lined him up as a nose a couple of times, played him off the edge, whoever he was going up against, including a projected first-round pick and Caden Proctor out on the edge. Daniel Lyons was winning. He was being extremely disruptive. The thing I love most about this defensive line, is something we talked about all offseason long, is the versatility. These guys, all of these guys, whether it's Danny Lyons, whether it's Jason Jenkins, whether it's the Desir brothers, whether it's Deontay McCray, who I thought played a damn good football game as well. They all have the ability to play in different spots. And so Tony White can really lean into giving offensive fronts a lot of different looks. Here's the other thing. It's a little bit of a smaller unit. Daryl Jackson's really, with Kevin Wynn on the bench sidelined with an injury, Daryl Jackson's really the only true nose big body Florida State has. That's okay if you scheme around it. What was Florida State doing a lot of, especially in pass first situations? We go and play stunts and games. We're a little bit smaller on the defensive line, specifically on the inside, but we got some athleticism. So we're going to run some stunts and games, get these guys being athletes. Gave Alabama a lot of problems. It's funny that when you have a great coach that knows his personnel and that tries to lean into his personnel, even if you have some question marks in terms of big bodies, you can still get after it up front. Mandrell Desir, I mean, how huge is it that Florida State, because Florida State needs these guys to play. How huge is it? You got 2 3-star defensive linemen who are undersized, kind of tweener bodies that can go out there and give you quality snaps wherever you put them. I mean, you can put Mandrell on the inside. You can put him off the edge. Wherever you put him, he plays, but both of the Desir brothers, but specifically Mandrell in this football game, they play with a different level of effort. You can say that for the whole defensive line. I thought it was really cool how Tony White leaned in to the personnel he has on the defensive line. On paper, I don't know if it's an elite defensive line, but you got some skill sets that you like. And if you can lean into those skill sets, very similar to the conversation we had with Tommy on offense. Look, Tommy's not going first round in the NFL draft as a quarterback prospect. He still can be very effective if you build your concepts around what he can do. Very similar conversation with this defensive line. I don't know how many first round NFL draft picks you have outside of Daryl Jackson right now. You can still, they still got some skill sets that I like. And hey, Deontay McCray, really good in the run game, thought he was disruptive in the pass rush. Look, there are a lot of guys that played a lot of football and played well for Florida State on the defensive line. Linebacker play. The best game from linebackers that Florida State has seen, and I'll say it, I think it was better than some of the play that we saw in 2023. Whether it was Elijah Herring, whether it was some of these guys who've been on this team, Justin Cryer, Blake Nicholson, like they weren't great last year, playing at a different level. Saturday afternoon, especially in space. I was really, really impressed with how Blake and Justin Cryer fit the run well. There were times where, hey, we have to go get out in space, run, chase, and tackle against an Alabama offense that has some speed on the outside. Thought these linebackers were flying around, like covering a lot of ground. The biggest takeaway I have is that I don't think Justin Cryer became a way, way faster of a football player in the offseason. Maybe he did. When you have a defensive coaching staff that puts these kids in the right positions and has them truly understanding the defense, that ability to be a little bit more confident and play faster between the ears, all of a sudden you're playing faster physically too. That's what I saw from the linebackers, all of them. I'm talking about Cryer, Herring, Blake Nicholson, Stephon Thompson coming off the edge was an absolute weapon, and beat Caden Proctor bad a couple of times from that Jack linebacker spot. In the back end, you have to give a shout out to not only Earl Little, who to me was the best football player on the team. And again, going back to that conversation, we've unlocked Earl Little. Like you found a spot where Earl Little can thrive as a football player. Best football player on the field, I think. Ashton Barker was really good too. And that he's a unique body. He's 6'3", 220. And he was flying around the football field, getting disruptive in coverage, coming up and tackling. The second and third level defenders, specifically the space safeties, the speed and physicality of which they were playing with was on a whole nother level. And I look at Earl Little and say it's hard not to see him as just like the heart and soul of this Florida State defense in a way that Florida State didn't have any of those guys last year. Like they had a few of those guys in 2023. They had zero of those kind of guys last year. Earl Little's emerged as that dude. Super exciting team that, look, am I going to get up here and say they're going to make the college football playoffs? No, I'm going to hold off. This team can get better. It's still a lot of new faces that are getting their feet wet on both sides of the football. If this team takes some steps, I think it's fair to have this conversation. We will pause it there, Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.